Find the derivative of tangent y equals cosine 2y plus x to the fourth. Then evaluate the derivative at the point 1 comma pi over 4. We have an implicit equation here. We have an equation involving x and y, but it's not solved for y in terms of x, and it's not possible to solve for y in terms of x, so we will have to take the derivative implicitly, which is done by taking the derivative of both sides with respect to x. And I will indicate this by putting a prime on both sides. Every time we take the derivative of a y term, we will end up with a y prime due to the chain rule. So the derivative of the left side, tangent of y, will be secant squared y. And then since we just took the derivative of a y term, we will get a y prime. That's coming from the chain rule. Equals to the derivative of the first term on the right side, the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Leave its inside alone, 2y, but then multiply by the derivative of the inside, which is 2, and then y prime, because the derivative of y is a 1 times y prime, since we just took the derivative of a y term for the chain rule. Plus the derivative of x to the fourth, which is a power rule, bring the 4 down, subtract 1 from the power, 4x cubed. We will want to solve for y prime here. I'm going to put the y prime on the left side of the secant squared. It's not inside of the secant squared, and so it's best written in front of it. And just the same for the sine 2y term, I'm going to bring the 2y prime out front with the negative, so negative 2y prime, and then sine of 2y, since it's not inside the sine, only the 2y is, plus 4x cubed. We have two terms here that have a y prime in them. I will want to isolate them, bring them together onto one side. Let's take this one that's on the right and add it over to the left. Y prime, secant squared of y, plus 2y prime sine of 2y equals 4x cubed. We can now factor the y prime out on the left, giving us secant squared of y plus 2 sine of 2y equals to 4x cubed. And we can now solve for y prime by dividing both sides by what's in the parentheses. So y prime will be 4x cubed divided by secant squared of y plus 2 sine of 2y. There's a simplified version of the derivative. The next thing to do is evaluate this at the point 1 comma pi over 4. The 1 will be the x, the pi over 4 will be the y. So y prime will equal 4 times 1 cubed divided by secant squared of pi over 4 plus 2 sine of 2 pi over 4. So y prime equals 4 times 1 cubed is a 1, divided by secant squared of pi over 4 means to evaluate secant of pi over 4 and then square the result, plus 2 times the sine of 2 pi over 4 can reduce to pi over 2 by canceling a 2 from the top and bottom. So y prime equals to 4 times 1, which is a 4, divided by the secant of pi over 4 is 1 over the cosine of pi over 4. And the cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. We will have 1 over that, plus 2 times the sine of pi over 2, which is a 1. So we have 4 divided by 1 over root 2 over 2 is the same as 1 times the reciprocal, which is 2 over root 2. And then we have that squared, plus 2 times 1 is just a 2. So we have 4 divided by 1 times 2 over root 2 will just be 2 over root 2 squared plus 2. So y prime equals 4 divided by 2 over root 2. If we square that, 2 squared is a 4. Root 2 squared is a 2 plus 2. And we have 4 over 2 is a 2 plus 2. So we have 4 over 2 plus 2, and 2 plus 2 is a 4. 4 divided by 4 comes out to 1.